Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking here. Just me flying solo today. Oh my gosh. I'm feeling a bit better every single day. For anybody who's new to the broadcast, about 4.5 weeks, almost 5 weeks ago, I had a horse riding accident where I broke or fractured 13 bones in my body, 9 ribs, 2 vertebrae, my shoulder blade, and my collarbone, and punctured my lung and dislocated my hip. So that was sort of rather a kibosh on my, any plans that I might have had for the next couple of months. But I went to see the bone doctor at the hospital yesterday, which was Wednesday for us, and he said that I'm doing quite well and that I should make a full recovery. And this is it. It takes quite a while to heal up from this sort of thing. They said, I had this accident, like I said, almost 5 weeks ago. Our time, 5 weeks tomorrow evening ago, so 4.5 to 5 weeks ago. And he said it should be about another 5 weeks before I make a full recovery. Now, onto the credits of the broadcast. Sorry, I should have completed this first. We are broadcasting. I'm broadcasting out of central Victoria over the Internet Australia and through GCN Radio Network in Minnesota, and Jason is engineering the broadcast. I don't think we'll be taking calls today. I don't think that's possible. What we'll be talking about is the blue team. And, oh my gosh, on Tuesday, we had a blue team member come around to our place. And if any of you are unaware of the ongoing saga between me and the blue team, let's just say that we're not friends. And granted, he was polite, but that doesn't matter because the blue team is not your friend. I should get that printed up into T-shirts. My gosh, it's actually true. The blue team is not your friend. The police are not your friend. Even if they're being polite to you, they're still not your friend, because I'll tell you why. In 2018, my local municipality, the Loddon Shire Council, they tried to enforce a fraudulent court order against me. When I hadn't done anything at all wrong, they had me up on, they came around here. They sent 6 officers in 3 separate cars around here when I was on my land, minding my own business back in 2018. And they, by force of arms, well, they arrested me for doing nothing, just being on my land. And what happened was they, by force of arms, made me sign an undertaking of bail. And I did so, but I wrote next to it, via coercio. This is very, very important. This could save somebody's life if you're subjected to the kind of police corruption that I was subjected to. They said, I signed my name, but I wrote next to it, via coercio. Actually, I could have just written VC when they told me to sign my name, but this is good enough. It worked. And it was how I got out of this situation. Via coercio means I was forced to engage in a contract with these people in Latin. It means by force. Coercio means coercion or force. Okay? Now, the law says, here in Australia, common law and also the Corporations Act says that contract cannot be via coercio. That's VIACOERCIO. It cannot be by force because contract via coercio is called extortion and it's a crime. And I wrote a bunch of other things around it, like this is enslavement and, et cetera, et cetera. I forget exactly what else that I wrote. Anyway, they behaved in a completely thuggish way and, literally laughed and high-fived each other as they got into their cars and drove off. This was back in 2018 when they did this, okay? And what it was they wanted me to appear at a courthouse on a certain date and the undertaking of this fraudulent, forced, for no reason, by force of arms, undertaking of bail was how they did it. When I got to the courthouse, they had a document there that they wanted me to sign off on. There was no court hearing. It was a backwards, out-of-the-way courthouse. There wasn't a judge present. It was just a clerk of courts who was present. And no one else, just one person, and that was a clerk of courts. Okay. Oh, my gosh. And I took the document and I refused to sign it on the spot. I said, I'm going to take this, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to return it to you. And, they said, fine. I said, I'm not signing this on the spot. It's too much for me to absorb right now. I'm going to take it and I'm going to get it checked. And that's what I said. Now, I took this document and I went through it with a fine-tooth comb. And at the bottom of the document, where the judge's signature should have been, there was a name. And there was no registration number for the judge. Every judge, or in Australia, there's probably a similar situation in America. But in Australia, every judge is registered with the Department of Justice and has a registration number. And any decision that a judge makes, they are required to, they often have an official stamp, but they sign the stamp, and either on the stamp or written next to or on the stamp, they have to write their registration number. And in Commonwealth countries, as Australia, New Zealand and Canada, and I think maybe India, but I'm not sure. I think India basically is a republic these days. It's not a Commonwealth country, I don't think, but I could be wrong. You'd have to check that. But I'm for sure in Australia, New Zealand and Canada, the judges are registered. This is whether they're a justice of the peace, a magistrate, a Supreme Court justice, whatever type of judge they are. They are registered with Westminster Abbey in London as a justice of the Crown, a Crown justice. And I don't know if that's the proper word or not, but no matter what type of judge they are, and they will have a registration number that is issued by Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. And upon her demise, it will be her heir and successor. I hope it's not Prince Charles. I believe it will not be Prince Charles, but probably Prince William, I would say. But they have a registration number that is registered with Westminster Abbey in London. And if they don't have this registration number, they're not a judge of any description. So any time that you get a legal document like this, you need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and you especially need to check the credentials of whoever they are saying is the judge at the bottom of the document. Now, the name that they had for the judge was A. Peters at the bottom of this document. And no registration number. And I said, hang on. So I went and I checked for myself all of the records of the Department of Justice here in Victoria, and I checked the list of JPs, which is available online, and I even went and I checked the bar register, which is the register of barristers and solicitors, and absolutely nowhere was I able to find a Justice A. Peters. I was not able to find an A. Peters anywhere on any of these legal registers, which meant that the whole document was null and void, and it was fraud. And attempting to impersonate a judge is a crime. Vincent will be on the broadcast today. He will be in hour number 2 with Kyle from Montana, I think. I think he lives in Montana. But anyway, Vincent will be on today. He'll be in hour number 2. For now, it's me flying solo, describing our local municipality, the Loddon Shire Council, and their corruption and the sort of things that they try to defraud and extort money out of people. And this is very, very important, because I don't know how things go with other municipalities. But I think that that this type of fraud might be really, really common, that I might have actually really stumbled across something here. But I'll tell you how it went. Just continuing the story, because this is a short segment. Okay. So I went through all the lists of judges, and I did not find A. Peters anywhere. So what I did all of this self-representing. I did not hire a lawyer. From what I gather, it's quite hard, it's quite difficult in Australia to get lawyers to represent you on this sort of thing, because they seem to have a club. And as George Carlin said, it's all a big club and you ain't in it. Anyway, I made up an affidavit outlining the basis for my assertion that they were in fraud and that they were attempting to extort money out of me. Every municipality in Australia, that none of them are governments. They're all corporations under the definition of the Corporations Act of Australia. I think it's Commonwealth. Oh gosh, the year, I think it's 1998, but I might be wrong. I'll have to check that in a minute. But anyway, contract without consent is a crime under the Crimes Act, and it's corporate misconduct under the Corporations Act. And if you have a corporation attempting to extort money out of you by attempting to engage in contract without consent or via coercio, then you're not obliged to pay the account. You should not pay the account. And you should, if you can, you should, if there is a relevant authority who's going to do anything about it, you should report it to the relevant authority so that they can do something about it. Now, with the municipalities, it's such a fat cash cow for the state government and for the municipalities themselves. There's nobody to call. But what you can do is you can make up an affidavit, okay, which is you go to the Department of Justice's website and Victorian Department of Justice or whatever state or municipality you're in, and in the United States you go to your local Department of Justice, and they will have a form for an affidavit, okay, where it's a form, you fill it in, you print it out, you fill in your relevant details, the basis of your affidavit, and then you take it to a justice of the peace, or you take it to a county courthouse, and you have it sworn as an affidavit. And then you make sure that you're absolutely accurate in everything that you're saying. Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking. Vincent will be on the broadcast in about half an hour's time with Kyle. But in the meantime, it's me flying solo, letting people know how to deal with a situation where you know that a municipality is behaving in a corrupt and fraudulent and extortionate manner towards you, and how you get out of it. You absolutely do not pay the account, even if you suspect that their behaviour is fraudulent. okay, because as soon as you agree to pay the account, you agree that there is a lawful basis to the account. And under common law that, it's not that you can't down the road claim that it was extortion, but it certainly makes it more difficult. Now, in Australia, the legislation is the Commonwealth Corporations Act 2001, and it's in the state of Victoria, it's the Fair Trading Act of 1999. And under both of those pieces of legislation, contract without consent is extortion, and also the Crimes Act, which I'm just going to look up. I'm actually, very aware that the time is ticking away, but under the Crimes Act as well, it is a crime. It is called extortion, and it's a very serious crime. It's basically that they are behaving as a cartel. That is, it's like Al Capone level of behaviour and what they're doing. And they are a corporation, the Victoria Police and every police force in Australia, and if you look into it, probably every police force in the world are all corporations, probably, at this stage. I don't know for sure, but I know that pretty well every police force in Australia is a corporation, and that means that if you don't feel like contracting with them, then you can say, I refuse to consent to contract with you. And probably they'll beat you up. But that just proves that they are behaving in a corrupt way, that they are behaving as a criminal cartel, as basically a mafia organisation. And legally, that's about where they stand at the moment, because, probably if you refuse to obey their directions, probably they are going to kidnap and bash you at this stage. But I think that we need to start resisting them because they are so corrupt, because they are behaving in a purely criminal way in compelling us by force of arms to contract with them. Anyway, getting back to it, I made up an affidavit, and I had it sworn in front of a justice of the peace. And when I was making up the affidavit, I had certified copies made of the affidavit. And what you do is you have the original affidavit, and then you have the certified copies, and you can very easily make certified copies of an affidavit. That is, you take the original affidavit and you make photocopies, and then you take the photocopies to the Justice of the Peace, or you can often take them to a notary public as well, somebody like a pharmacist, a solicitor. It varies from place to place, but people like school principals, pharmacists, often police officers, although with me that wasn't going to happen because there was a conflict of interest there. But, depending on where you are, sheriffs or whatever, that they will all, be qualified to witness statutory declarations. So you get the original, you keep the original somewhere safe, and then you send off a copy of the affidavit to each interested party. So basically, everybody who's named in the affidavit, or each organisation that is named in the affidavit as being a party to whatever behaviour it is that, is outlined in the affidavit, you send copies of the affidavit to all of them, okay? And you keep a few copies of the affidavit. This is certified copies of the affidavit at home in case you need to send them off at short notice. And this was what I did. Now, the Loddon Shire Council responded. This is the most laughable thing, because at that time, as soon as I did that, legally they were checkmated. Okay? As soon as I pointed out that I was not going to pay this account because they were in fraud and they were they were engaged in extortion, and I was not going to pay the account because they were operating basically as a mafia cartel, trying to get me to pay them money so that I could own my own land and live on my own land. That is pure extortion. That is pure mafia cartel behavior. And that they had issued a fraudulent court order against me where there was no judge's signature at the bottom of it, with a fraudulent judge's name, no registration number, a judge that doesn't even exist. And I believe that the words that I used in the affidavit were name that looks as if it was pulled out of a breakfast cereal box, or I have a type of breakfast cereal here in Australia, pulled out of a Wheat Bix box. You know, in America you might say pulled out of a hat. The meaning is essentially the same. This is it. And I refused to pay it. How did they respond? They sent me another bill, another invoice, which I ignored. And they have, I didn't quite ignore it. I contacted a particular person who maybe I should have completely ignored it, but I didn't. I contacted a particular person who works at the Loddon Shire Council, who I am not able to name. And I will not name for reasons that will become apparent in a moment. But I contacted this person and I threatened to sue them into bankruptcy, which I'm perfectly entitled to, under the law, to say such things. This person attempted to extort money out of me, and, you know, I was perfectly entitled to feel extremely upset. I did not threaten this person with physical harm. I would not threaten this person with physical harm. That would be extremely stupid of me to threaten anyone at this stage with personal harm. And it's just that I did threaten to sue them into bankruptcy. That was the words that I used for what they were doing. Maybe I should have let sleeping dogs lie. But, you know, if they continue, then I may still, you know, if our justice system ever opens up again, I may still sue this person because they're in the wrong. They're engaged in extortion. And that is grounds for a massive legal claim. And they know it. They responded by sending the blue team around to me again, meaning the Victoria Police. And the Victoria Police issued an intervention order against me, claiming that I had issued threats to this individual. Now, that's very deceptive language. And I would say that the Victoria Police at this stage are acting as the pit bulls, as the the attack dogs of the Loddon Shire Council, which they are absolutely not under the law there to do. But of course, you know, what is written in the law, in legislation, okay, and what actually happens are often two completely different things. Under legislation, Victoria Police are there to maintain the peace. In actuality, they are the attack dogs of the government. And if the government is supporting what you're doing, then, you know, like if, for instance, you're somebody like, I don't know, Black Lives Matter or Antifa, then you could literally riot in the streets and the Victoria Police will sit around twiddling their thumbs. But if you are somebody who is merely trying to prevent the local municipality from extorting money out of you using every lawful means at your disposal, and in no way did I do anything that was contrary to either common law or, you know, the legislation. I did everything I could, and yet they sent their attack dogs after me, which was the Victoria Police, which is grounds for a significant damages claim in the future. Hello, my name is Guineith Isaacs. Vincent will be hosting the broadcast in hour 2 with Kyle, but in the meantime, this is my last segment, and I'm just going to wrap it up by saying how this particular little situation has unfolded and where it stands at this point in time. Now, where it stands is if the Loddon Shire Council ever attempt to enforce this fraudulent court order, then I'm going to sue them. And I'm going to sue them for damages and extortion and whatever else I can find to sue them with, you know, even up to and including high treason for impersonating a government, which they, it's just they have not got a leg to stand on, and there's no way that they would win, because under the Corporations Act, they are in fraud. Under the Crimes Act, they are criminally liable. And I would seek criminal and legal damages in the order of tens of millions of dollars at this stage. They have all been put on legal notice with the issuance of cease and desist orders, and they can't do anything against me. And if they, against the law, try to get their way using force of arms or thuggery, then they're legally liable, because those cease and desist orders are out there. That's a whole nother area. I haven't got time to describe how to issue a cease and desist order right now. but there's no way that they would ever win. So, but it doesn't stop them from, trying. And what they have done, which is the last card that they have in their deck, is they issued this, what do you call it, restraining order against me, which has no basis under the law, actually. And I objected to it. I didn't object in person. Maybe I should have. Maybe I could have. But I'm not cooperating with their courts because I'm fed up with, some guy who's not a magistrate issuing court orders. That's not lawful. And at the moment here in Victoria, if you're lucky, you get a registrar. A registrar is not a magistrate, is not a judge. It is a wielder of a rubber stamp. And I refuse to acknowledge the validity of them. But I did write to their supposed court outlining my objections. And the objections that I raised were basically completely ignored. And this fraudulent restraining order was issued anyway. Now, I'm not going to... It would be this very stupid thing. Although the restraining order has no basis in law, it would be a very stupid thing for me to defy it, because it would give them the excuse that they need to engage me and kidnap me and bash me up under force of arms, and then to, in the future, use that against me, probably. So I'm not going to defy it, okay? And that's the last trick that they have up their sleeves. They literally cannot do anything else. I hardly leave my farm anyway. So, they have basically nothing further that they can do against me. Because if it ever came out that, that they had come around here and used force of arms against me, and if the police come around here, they renewed it for another 12 months. They sent one officer around here. I was not polite. I have no reason to trust them. I have no reason to be polite. They are acting as a criminal case at this time, but I didn't use physical force against them. They stayed on their side of the fence and handed me their fraudulent court order, and I stood on my side of the fence and told them exactly what I thought about them. Okay, we've got the music again. We're at the top of the hour news, and Vincent will be back. He will be in hour number 2 with Kyle from Montana.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Guineith, thank you for doing a great job. Hour number 1. Kyle's with us. Jason's engineering. Thank you, and welcome, Kyle.
Good morning, Vince. Can you hear me okay?
5 by 5. Kyle, I was talking to Mrs. Finelli yesterday, and I said, we have never done a broadcast about tools. And the guy that would be great to do a broadcast about tools is Kyle, because he's a handy guy. He's been in the profession of automotive mechanics, and he does all kinds of things with tools. So I asked her if she would mind placing a call. She did. You said you could do it, and here we are. So, class, this is not rehearsed, and what we're going to be talking about is tools from our personal perspectives, what we think works, what we think you should consider, and so forth. So let's start with this. Kyle, I have a pet peeve about screwdrivers, and I looked on the internet about screwdrivers, and I was looking at features of screwdrivers, quality screwdrivers, and what they come up with is like the 10 best. And the big selling point is not the business end of a screwdriver. It's not the tip. It's not the chrome vanadium. It's not the grinding of the tip. It's not the width of the tip. It's not the depth of the tip. It is the comfort and color of the handle, which makes no sense if you are using tools as a mechanic. For example, I think overall, the very best screwdrivers that you can buy overall for value, which means money spent and product received, is the Craftsman screwdriver with this semi-clear handle that's blue, white, and red, and it's made with a chrome vanadium shaft, and it has a ground tip, not a stamped tip. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree that they are excellent screwdrivers. But having worked in the electrical trade for so long, Vince, I have really become accustomed to, I really enjoy the Klein line of tools. They're more expensive, but I've got probably, 8 or 9 different kind of Klein screwdrivers that I've had for 20 years. So I do like them a lot. I've been thinking about this since you called a lot. And we're going to talk about, I know we're going to talk about tools and things like that people should have. I want to, because you and I both almost have a fetish about tools. We love them. And that's the one thing my wife has always encouraged me to buy, because she knows that I'm going to use them. And I have used them for 40 years. So the thing I would want to preface our show with today is this. Folks, if you go out and buy a bunch of tools and you don't know yourself, and by that I mean if you really think that you someday might need to use it, so I'll go get XYZ tool, and you haven't ever done anything with tools because it's not your interest, I'm afraid you're wasting your money. I think if you decide that you're going to do something and then you actually set apart your mind to do it, then what Vince and I are going to be talking about is going to be very valuable to you. But I just was thinking about that, Vince, because we're seeing more and more people, like people that were in this Texas freeze, that know about preparedness and survival. I've watched a bunch of them on YouTube, and yet they had no backup power. They had no way to cook. And yet they're talking on YouTube and different things about their own particular ability, about how other people should prepare. And yet they're not doing anything. So it's like, so I just don't want you to be a keyboard preparedness person and waste money. So Vince and I both are in the business of, we don't waste hardly anything. When we take care of stuff, we use everything we've got. I do. I know Vince does. He uses everything. So anyway, I just wanted to preface that with that little caveat, if you will. But yeah, I love the Craftsman tools are great. And I agree, you don't want a stamped tool. You don't want a stamped screwdriver. You want a ground tip. If you can afford it, and you can find some that are really, I think some of them are even carbide tipped on the end. But they will last you forever. And so in my opinion, it's worth spending a little money to get really good quality tools. And anymore, I find most of my tools anyway, Vince, for the last probably 15 years have come out of secondhand stores, old tool sheds, garage sales. I love going to garage sales where it's an estate sale where some old guy's passed away, and usually the kids haven't got a clue. You know, they don't know split beans from coffee. And I bought whole drill sets for $5, you know, of the real good, high quality drill sets. Different things like that, you know, I'm sad for the people. I'm sad for the dad that died, that left his stuff to children that don't know and or appreciate it, you know. Anyway, that's kind of my first thought on that stuff. Go ahead. So
very, very well said. You mentioned Klein for electricians, and I do have some Klein screwdrivers, and I use them for electrical work specifically. So I have categories of screwdrivers. So for example, let's just talk about the construction. The shaft of a screwdriver for me has got to be chrome vanadium, which is an alloy of steel with chrome and vanadium. It's really hard. So if you have a chrome vanadium screwdriver, chances are that you are not going to break the tip and you are not going to round out the tip unless it's a Phillips type screwdriver. But if it's a flathead and you use it properly and use the right screwdriver for the right job, you probably are going to have the tip remain really good for 40 or 50 years. At least mine are. And so the reason I recommended Craftsman, I said, you know, best value for most purposes, it's a great way to go. Now for electrical work, I have the Klein as well. But a Klein screwdriver can cost you $15 each, and that's a lot to me. But I do have a few, and I got them used, and they're in perfect condition. So I have screwdrivers that I call working screwdrivers, electrical screwdrivers, and just screwdrivers. Now, for example, if I'm doing mechanical work on a car, I'm going to use a good quality screwdriver with the right size tip, the right thickness tip, the right width tip, the right length of the shaft, and the right grip. And most of the time, that's going to be a Craftsman. So we have a wide assortment of Craftsman screwdrivers. Now, you can buy Craftsman screwdrivers in a kit, and you might get, 20 screwdrivers for, let's say, $35 or so, or $30 on sale, or $20-something on sale. But they're not the good ones. They are, and you have to look at the tip, because if they are stamped, you'll see kind of ridges in them. Ridges in the flat screwdrivers. The ground ones, you can, if you look carefully, you'll see grinding wheel marks that go lengthwise with the screwdriver. Those are the best ones. The ones that are stamped are the cheap ones. Now they look the same. From 5 feet away, they look the same. From 4 feet away, they probably look the same. And until you look at them really closely, and until you know what to look for, they appear to be the same. Like, why not get this whole kit of, 20 screwdrivers for $20-something rather than one screwdriver for $10? Okay? So look at the tips if you want the right one. And if you have the right screwdriver tip, you won't slip off the screw as easily than if you don't have the right size screwdriver. That's one thing. I have another kind of screwdriver I called a working screwdriver. Those are the ones that are really banged up because they've been used for chipping, they've been used for splitting concrete, they've been used for scraping, those kinds of things. They've been used with a hammer on the end, and I call those working screwdrivers. And they have, they've been rounded, but they never were the top quality screwdrivers. I used cheaper ones for those purposes. So I have the working screwdrivers that I don't want to say I'm rough with them, but I'm not using them for the exact intended purpose of turning screws. Then I have the electrical type screwdrivers, which are the Klein. So those are the three classifications of screwdrivers. And just to put an exclamation point on this, screwdrivers of the Craftsman variety that I'm recommending, the ground tip, have become so expensive that I bought about 100 of them used on eBay for about $100 shipped. So not everybody was going to buy 100 screwdrivers, but I wanted them because good quality screwdrivers are getting hard to get, and most tools today are not made in the United States. They're made in China. And it seems to me that the marketing people get the GDP in a room and they say, so which one of these screwdrivers would you like to buy? Do you like the orange handle? Do you like the blue handle? Do you like this big fat round ball grip? Or do you like the grip that looks cylindrical? Or do you want this textured grip? Do you like the one that feels cushy? Which one would you buy? And that's what they seem to be selling. They're selling it based on looks, and they're selling it based on the grip, and they are discounting the business end of the screwdriver, which is the most important part, which is the tip. Kyle?
Yeah, the interesting thing about those screwdrivers are that if you get these real comfortable grips, like, and I've picked up a few of them, like I said, at garage sales and different things, and over the time frame, and there's one in particular that I use a lot, and it's got, for lack of a better term, it's got like 3 little edges that stick up, and it's a rubber cushion grip, and it happens to be a ground tip screwdriver, which is why I grabbed it. But those, you can put a lot of torque on them with your hand, and if it's a cheap screwdriver, you'll bust that tip off so fast it'll make your head spin. If you've got any strength at all, you, especially most men and even some women, will just bust those tips with those real ergodynamic grips, because it allows you to put a lot more pressure on the screwdriver. I think it's hilarious when you mention things, Vince, that we have never talked about this, but I have a whole set of different screwdrivers that I use that you've got that have been banged on. And yes, I am rough with them. I'll use them like certain sizes. Like I have 3 or 4 different sizes of screwdrivers that are longer, that are rougher, that I will use. I hear the music. I'll finish that on the other side.
Yeah. Kyle's with us, and we're giving a primer on tools, and we're not going to just talk about screwdrivers. We'll talk about other tools, and we're going to give you some food for thought. I've never heard this discussed on the radio, but here we are. Kyle's with us. We're talking about tools, hand tools specifically. Kyle, I'm at eBay right now, and there's a 30-piece vintage Craftsman screwdriver set. It's a lot, L-O-T, meaning a group of them. It's $99.99 for 30 of them, free shipping, so that's $3.33 a piece. But they're beat up, and it's amazing. They didn't cost that much when they were new. So this is from the 70s. So these screwdrivers are, about 50 years old, 40, 50 years old, and they're beat up, and they're still cost more than they cost when they were brand new. Some people really beat them up, and if you look at the pictures, and go to eBay class and take a look at screwdrivers, look at the tips, and you'll see the ground ones versus the stamped ones. And once you learn the difference, you're not going to buy stamped ones. Not if you're serious about using, screwdrivers for a purpose that you really want to work properly. For example, when I work on electrical sockets and I screw the wire down tight on the terminal, I use a very specific screwdriver because I know the thickness of the blade is the right thickness. It fits perfectly. The width of the blade is perfect. And I know that I'm not going to drive that screwdriver into the palm of my hand, okay, if I were to slip. But, I'm very careful. And you might want to wear a glove in case you do slip, but, leather glove. But I only use specific screwdrivers for specific things. So my electrical screwdrivers, I don't use under the hood of a car. I don't do it. I use it for home wiring. And so I just wanted to share that. Any comments about that, Kyle?
Yeah, I actually have the same thing, Vince. I've got a whole toolbox that has my electrical screwdrivers. It has all of my electrical things that if I need to, it's got a meter in it in a case. It's got, tape and screws that I know that are real common. And I never use that toolbox and those tools on a car, ever. In fact, if I need to help a friend or anything like that, I know I can just grab that toolbox, put it in the back of my car, and any other little incidentals that I wouldn't have in there, like, wire nuts or whatever. And I know I can go because I know what I've got in there. I've got the same thing.
Yeah. I've got the same thing, except it's not a toolbox. It's a tool bag. So the wire nuts, the different size and color coated wire nuts, the crimpers, the strippers, the meter, all of those things, extra sockets, extra switches, test lamp, all of that is the crimping tool, the ferrules, all of those electrical type things are in one location, in one container. Mine's a bag, yours is a box. Great. I mean, it's amazing, Kyle, how we think very similarly. One of the things I wanted to mention was socket sets. And would you like to start with your thoughts on socket sets? Sockets, the different kinds of sockets, the impact versus thin wall versus 6-point versus 12-point, 3/8, quarter-inch, half-inch drive. Would you like to go there, or do you want me to start?
Well, I'll tell you, Vince. Go ahead. I have only one other thing on screwdrivers, real quick. I will actually look for. Yeah, I will actually look for screwdrivers that are a little bit beat up. If the bigger ones, not the little ones, but the bigger ones that are a little bit beat up at garage sales and secondhand stores. A lot of times, if you buy a couple of really good screwdrivers from them and you pay it, they'll throw in 2 or 3 of the old beat up ones. Like if I'm going to pry say I'm changing front brakes on a set of disc brakes on a car, you need to get the pad off of the rotor so that you can remove the caliper. And I know I'm kind of getting a little bit deep for a lot of people, but I will use an older, sort of, lack for a better term, beat up, little bigger screwdriver to kind of worm my way in there to so I've got some leverage to be able to push on that brake pad to be able to pry it away from the rotor. So I look for those as well. And like I said, sometimes you can just get them thrown in. But jumping to sockets, I like to have...
back to screwdrivers for just a second. Kyle, that's what I would call a working screwdriver. And the reason, class, that Kyle uses my terminology, working screwdriver, with rounded tips, is because he doesn't want the sharp edges of that screwdriver tearing up the brake system, maybe damaging a new set of brake pads that he's putting on if he needs to adjust, the caliper. So sometimes you want that old screwdriver, and that's why we have separate classes of screwdrivers. The more I learn about Rod Serling, the originator of the Twilight Zone, the more I have greater and greater and greater respect for him. I had great respect initially, but he had, and I've seen some of his interviews, he had exactly the same point of view that we at USA Prepares had. He said that he was asked, how successful did he think the Twilight Zone was? And he said, well, it was moderately successful. Okay? And that's kind of where we are. And for the same reason, because he was teaching people how to think. And it's really hard. Now, the sitcoms blew him away in the ratings. Absolutely blew him away. But in terms of teaching people how to think, sitcoms, you can't even remember what the plot was with a sitcom. So, Kyle, did you want to, we spent a half hour on screwdrivers. I can't believe it. And we just barely scratched the surface. Socket sets. And do you want to start that, or do you want me to?
You go ahead, Vince. I love listening to what you got to say. Okay.
So I bought a socket set back in probably the late 60s. It came with a metal case, and the brand was Husky, Husky. And I'm not convinced that Husky that you can buy today is the same company. I don't think it is. It may be. I may be confused, but I don't think so. So I still have all of those sockets, the ratchet, the extension, the whole thing. And I'm looking at that set on eBay. List price back then with the little metal case for it, 14 pieces. It's 3/8 of an inch drive, and it's called a vintage USA 3/8 drive Husky ratchet set or socket set. If you want to buy it now, it's $45 and $10 shipping. So $55. Now, when I bought it, brand new, it was $19.99. Okay. And maybe it was even on sale for a couple dollars off. Maybe it was $17.99. I don't know. But I know the list price was $19.99. I still have it. Every one of those tools works perfectly, and not one of them has broken in 50 years. I use them every day. That is my go-to socket set because it has 12-point and 6-point sockets. Now, what that means is when you look down on the business end of a socket, does it have 12 points or does it have 6? And I'll ask Kyle to tell you the difference and why you would want 12 point or 6 point or both. And there's reasons for having them. But the thing that I like about the Husky is the vintage Husky is that it is a fine tooth ratchet. So when you go to ratchet backwards, click, 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 it has more click stops than a rough tooth ratchet. Like the Craftsman that look like a teardrop, they didn't have as many points. And I don't like them because, I have to work the ratchet more because there are fewer teeth if I'm working in a tight spot. That being said, I want to say one other thing about ratchets. If you can, you have a choice usually to either pull the ratchet toward you or push the ratchet away from you. What you should do is position yourself so that you're always, whenever possible, pulling the ratchet toward you. Because if you're working on a tight nut or a tight bolt that is stuck and all of a sudden it's going to break loose, if you are pulling it toward you, you're probably not going to cut yourself and bang your knuckles. But if you're pushing it away from you and you're in a tight spot, when that nut or bolt breaks loose, you can smash your hand and cut yourself up. Those are just a couple thoughts. Kyle, 6 point, 12 point, and position of ratchet.
Agreed. Everything, Vince. In my opinion, you want both. If you're going to buy sockets, get one set of, depending on what you know you're going to work on, get one set of 6 point that has all, like if you're wanting metric, get a complete good set. One that has especially 13 millimeter, which doesn't come in some of the cheaper sets. You're going to want 8 millimeter for sure, because some of the socket sets don't have an 8 millimeter in them. And they, for some reason, these car manufacturers want to make sure you can't work on them. So if you haven't got the 13 or the 8, then you can't do it. So anyway, you want, the 12-point socket, and I have lots of them, over the years, and I agree with you. If I can get an American-made, I also have, I have a set of Husky, deep sockets that I've had for probably 30 years, real old ones. Anyway, the 12-point sockets are really good for, if you just barely can get into something. They're a lower torque socket. You can't put quite as much torque on them as you can the 6 point. If you're going to break something loose that is, say, like an axle nut, they're a very large socket. I think they're like 1 1/8 or 1 1/2, something. I don't remember anymore. They make them different sizes on different cars. But anyway, you will notice that those for an impact wrench or for big heavy-duty sockets, they're always 6 point. There's only 6 sides if you look inside of that thing for the nut. And the reason is because they're stronger and you can put more torque on them. I've had, one time many years ago, we had to change out an axle on my daughter's car, and the thing was rusted on there. And, it was just, I mean, we sprayed it with Power Blaster and Liquid Wrench, and it was just so blooming hard. And finally, I got the heavy dutiest breaker bar I could on one of them, a great big, it was like 1 1/2 size socket, and a breaker bar on the end of it, a piece of pipe on the end of it. And me and my son were leaning on this thing and finally broke it loose. But it was just the worst one I've ever had to do, the hardest one I've ever come across in my life. But anyway, that's one of the reasons you want 6 point, and then so you can put more torque on them if you need to. And then the 12 point is for a lighter duty, but they're also easier to fit on the nut. If you can sometimes, if you've got a 12 point, you can just kind of fit it. You'll usually, almost always actually, be able just to kind of take the socket, maybe stick it on what you need to do. It's a little faster than having to rotate the socket or each time to try to make the socket fit over a nut, rather than using the 6 point, which you might have to rotate. It just takes less time to put them in.
Mm-hmm.
But
and there's
anyway.
one other reason. And for those of you who work on antiques, you might have a four-sided nut or a four-sided bolt. And, that would be something from maybe the 1900s, up to 1920s, 30s maybe. And if you're going to work on one of those, a 6-point socket will not work. An open-end wrench will work, and a 12-point socket will work, but a 6-point socket won't. So, as Kyle said, for the heavy-duty torque, nuts, bolts, etc., you want 6-point. So always select a 6-point. Always make sure that it fits all the way over the head of the nut or the bolt so that you don't strip it. And Kyle, what you're talking about is those axle nuts get torqued to like 230 to 250 pounds when they are put on. Then you add some rust and corrosion to it, and you're really looking at, literally, class, 230 foot-pounds of torque is if you weighed 230 pounds and you could stand on the far end of a bar that's 1 foot long from the center of the axle, that's how much torque it would take to loosen it. Now, if it's corroded, it might take 500 foot-pounds of torque. Or standing at 230 pounds of weight, 2 feet away from the center point of the axle. So that's what Kyle was talking about by using a bar on the end of a breaker bar to extend the length. But be really careful because that breaker bar can shatter. Now, Kyle, you mentioned the word impact. There is a difference between an impact socket and just a regular hand used socket. Would you like to share the difference between them?
Sure. Well, your impact is designed to take repeated hammers, if you will, repeated vibrations from an impact air wrench. And by the way, I'm going to put in a plug for a tool that I purchased about 3 years ago, and it has been a lifesaver for me. It is a DeWalt battery-powered 1,200 foot-pound electric impact wrench. It has 3 settings, and they're a couple of $100. But I saved up for it, and then anyway, well, I ended up getting one, brand new, and a 5 amp hour battery with it. But for breaking big nuts and things like that, it is absolutely amazing. You put that on the highest setting, and I mean, it will vibrate and break things loose that you just, I don't lean on nothing anymore. I just don't. I have the strength in some respects, but I just don't want to take a chance anymore on, like you just said, a breaker bar breaking or, the end of it, something snapping and me ending up on the ground. When I was a lot younger, I bounced a little better, but I don't bounce very good now. Anyway, so impact are designed to handle that kind of torque and repeated vibrations of the impact wrench to break it loose. They're hardened steel. They're thicker walls usually. You usually don't use them for small everyday stuff. They don't fit around, because some of these nuts are really tight where they want to get into them, and a thicker wall socket won't fit over the nut and then right next to whatever they engineered next to it. So I do have many sockets, whole sets of them that are hardened thin wall sockets, but they're still not impact rated for like an impact air gun or something along those lines. It's just you'll use the impact with an impact gun, whether it's an air wrench or electric, and you'll use the thin wall sockets. Snap-on used to be really good. If I ever find used Snap-on sockets, they're thin walled and they are really heavy duty, hard steel, and they work extremely well for getting into really tight spaces. But they are very expensive. I always buy them used. I can't afford brand new ones. Your comment?
Okay, so what Kyle's saying is the impact sockets are typically black. They are not the chrome finished sockets. They are thicker walled, they're heavier, and a lot of times, well, they're available in standard length and deep well sockets. We use them whenever we use an impact wrench, an air tool. We don't have a battery-powered one, but we have air tools, and they hammer the sockets. You do not, let me say it a different way, you do not want to use a standard socket with an impact wrench, whether it be electric or air-powered, because you can shatter that socket. And when that happens, pieces of that socket go flying. It's like a hand grenade, but with fewer pieces going flying. But it's really, really dangerous. So whenever you use these kind of tools, even hand tools, you should be wearing eye protection and gloves. And I like leather gloves. We'll be right back. So I mentioned that Husky socket set that I paid around $20 for back about 50 years ago. It's available for sale on eBay for $45. But if you type in Harbor Freight Tools, and that was a 14-piece set for $45 plus $10 shipping, so $55 total. If you go to Harbor Freight, you can buy a 40-piece, 3/8 inch and 1/4 inch SAE metric socket set for $5.99. And they say compare it to Craftsman. Well, really? I got to tell you, I would not be using that $5.99 40-piece socket set for anything significant. I would expect that I'd have broken knuckles from the ratchet slipping. And I'm not being unkind. I've just seen these cheap socket sets, and they are really cheesy. They are not the same quality. The metal's not the same. The alloy's not the same. Even the tolerances are not the same. So what you'll find out with these cheap, some of these cheap Harbor Freight tools, the wrenches, the tolerances, the width of the opening that you'd put on a nut or bolt is different. It is not as tight, generally speaking. It's like the machinery that they used to make this is worn out, and the tolerances are not right. And if you're using it for serious work, you're likely to strip the head of the nut or bolt. That's been my experience. That being said, there's a specialty tool that I'd like Kyle's opinion on so that he can share that with the class, and that is a swivel head spark plug ratchet wrench. Kyle, do you have one of those?
Vince, you know something that's so funny? I was sitting here thinking during the break, we really need to jump to ratchets real quick. And that was going to be the very first thing I was going to suggest to get for people to get is a medium length 3/8 drive socket ratchet that has a swivel head that will arch around back and forth to be able to get out different things that you have a hard time getting to. The other type of ratchets that are really important is I have stubby ratchets, things that are only like about 4 inches, 3.5 inches long, but they're really handy for getting into real tight spaces if you can only get a socket on something and you haven't got room to put a really long extension on your regular socket. I've had to use them. I have a 1/2 inch drive, a 3/8 drive in that, and a 1/4 inch drive in those because they're extremely handy. But like Vince said, try to find one with the finest teeth. In other words, when you're trying to rotate the ratchet, you hear these little tiny clicks. And if you find one that's one way and then find one that's coarser, you find a fine one and a coarse one, you'll be able to know the difference right away. But anyway, that articulating head on that ratchet is one of my favorite tools. I also have a ratchet that you can take the handle. Once you put the ratchet, hook it up to the extension and or socket, that you can tighten it with the handle. The handle will twist and tighten something down so that you don't have to even operate the ratchet itself. It turns. There's a little rotating handle on it. That is also one of my favorite ratchets, and I've had that for probably 15 to 18 years at least and used it hundreds of times, and it's never broke on me or given me any trouble. I really enjoy having those.
That's great. And the the flex head ratchet that I have is a Champion. It says Champion, like in Champion spark plug. And I have a feeling they had it made for them by a quality U.S. tool manufacturer like Husky, because it really looks like Husky to me. And that is my go-to ratchets are my 3/8 inch Husky 50-year-old ratchet and the Champion spark plug ratchet, which I believe is also a Husky, because it has a longer handle and I can have more torque. And I use that for just about everything. So if I'm going to take a drain plug out of an oil pan to change the oil, I probably am going to use that Champion spark plug ratchet, because it's got a longer handle and it's easier for me. And
yep.
There's something else I wanted to mention, and that was what? We talked about spark plugs. We talked about ratchets. Spark plug sockets. Spark plug socket. Oh, by the way, that Champion flex head ratchet, it's like $50 now with shipping. Used $50. You can get one way cheaper at Harbor Freight, but they're nowhere near as good. Spark plug sockets. When changing a spark plug, you want to use a spark plug socket because they have a rubber insert, generally speaking. And that rubber insert cushions and also holds in place the spark plug so it doesn't fall out. But the new ones, you buy a new one, I would suggest you consider, and I looked at a lot of them before I bought a couple new ones, OEM brand from AutoZone. I like them the best. But you'll find out that the new ones are not made in this country, and the rubber insert falls out. And that can get stuck on the spark plug way down where you can't get it. So make sure you re-glue that rubber insert so that it won't fall out of the socket. Kyle, any 10-second comments?
I agree with you, Vince. Absolutely. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your wealth of knowledge with our class, Kyle. Kyle Harris, thank you very much.